Today on Power in the Word.
I'm telling you what, you listen to the radio and CNN for about 3 hours and see what you're thinking. I'm not trying to be negative, but just see what you're thinking. See how your mindset completely goes back to what's going on in the world, and all of a sudden you fall into a trap of missing what... Let me tell you something. When you focus on Jesus, you can't focus on those things. And fear will grip you, and doubt will grip you, and all these things are starting to try to come to get you. Why? Because you're not keeping your eyes on Jesus. Turn to somebody and say, keep your eyes on Jesus.
Welcome to Power in the Word. Life can be difficult. Perhaps it's been hard for you to stay focused on what really matters, and that is our relationship with Jesus Christ. Well, today Dr. Norris gives us insight into the importance of staying centered on Jesus Christ and His love and His grace. Stay tuned, you'll be encouraged.
Now I want you to get a hold of this. So when we think about people, let's look at people through the eyes of Jesus and see them as Jesus sees them. Because Jesus doesn't see any sin in the world. He don't see all the mess you see in the world. He sees everybody through His Son in absolute imperfection. So we're going to keep our eyes on Jesus here. Let's go to Genesis 49 verse 1. And Jacob called his sons and he said, gather together that I may tell you what shall befall you in the last days. Now here's Jacob talking about the last days and what's going to befall him in the last days. And how this thing's going to end in the last days and what it's going to look like in the last days. Now we know that Jacob was a deceiver, right? Now Jacob and Israel was the same person. You know that. He got a name change. But Jacob stole the birthright. You know the story, right? And he stole the birthright, and then he went out and he wrestled with God, with Jesus all night. That was Jesus he was wrestling with, by the way. And the Bible said he wrestled with Jesus, and then he told Jesus, here's what he told Jesus, you're not going to leave me till you bless me. And that night he got a new name, and he became Israel. But we're going to use Jacob today so you'll understand. Jacob means supplanter or deceiver. But now what does Israel mean? It means God of peace. Watch this. I want you to see this. It means the Prince of God. So they wrestled all night. Jacob said, I want to gather all my children together. Now he got a new name, but they called him Jacob here. I want you to see this because this is powerful, because sometimes we just read through the Bible and we just read it, but Jacob's coming to them as a father, but in verse 2 he's going to change it and come to them as a leader. Look at verse 2. Gather together and hear, you sons of Jacob, and listen. Listen to Israel, your father. Now, he said, listen to me, sons of Jacob, but I want you to understand that I'm your father and I'm Israel. In other words, I'm the Prince of God. I want you to get a hold of that. Names meant a lot of things in the Old Testament. We don't relate them today. They have very significance. Now you know what Jacob did. Jacob had 2 concubines. Jacob worked 14 years to get him a Rachel. He got him a Leah to start with. Now I have never quite understood that story. But the Bible said that he worked for Rachel and ended up getting Leah. But he didn't ever love Leah, but Leah was a producing machine. He had 2 concubines, one by Leah and one by Rachel. He got 4 children with the concubines. He got only 2 children by Rachel, which was a woman that he loved, but she died in childbirth, giving birth to Benjamin. Died immediately, giving birth to what was going to resonate the world. I want you to get this. But Jacob had a significance in his life because even though he had 4 by the concubines and 2 by her, how many children did he have? He had 12 boys because it was the 12 tribes of Israel, which established the whole covenant. Reuben being the oldest, born of Leah. Only Joseph and Benjamin was born of Rachel. But I want you to see something. He had a girl named Diana, which ended up being a prophet. You know the story. I'm not going to get on the prophet because he only had 1 daughter and 12 sons because he was establishing the whole 12 tribes of Israel and establishing the covenant of what Jesus would come out. You know that he had Judah, and Jesus came out of the lineage of Judah. And you know he had Levi, which established the priesthood. Now we know what happened with Reuben. I'm going to break all this down so I ain't got to read you a bunch of scriptures, but Reuben went and slept with one of the concubines, Bilhah. And he slept with her and didn't have any relationships except sexual relationships. And because of that, he lost his birthright. You know the story. And Levi, which was the son, all the birthright, the double portion was given to who? Joseph. Levi got the priesthood. Now watch this, because I want you to get this. So when we read the story, we see that something's about to shift here, something's about to change. He's about to tell them what's going to happen. Let's read on here in verse 3. Reuben, who was my firstborn, my might, my beginning of my strength, and the excellence of dignity and the excellence of power. Verse 4. Now watch this. This is revelation right here. Unstable as water. Now watch this. I never saw this. So I went and looked up this word in the Greek, in the Hebrew. Do you know what this word water always represents in the Hebrew according to the book of Proverbs? Sex. What gets Reuben? He went and had sex with a concubine, which was Bilhah, which was the concubine that also Jacob had sex with and had a couple kids with. You see where I'm going here? That was really his stepmother as a concubine. So because of that, Reuben lost his covenant. Unstable as water, and you shall not excel. Because you went into the father's bed, then you defiled it, and you went up to my couch. In other words, you went the same place your father went, and it can't happen. Now you remember, let's back all the way back up to Abraham. Y'all good? Let's back up all the way back up to Abraham. Now Abraham slept with who? Hagar. And got him Ishmael. He was 85 years old when he did that. At 99, he had to be circumcised because what had went into Hagar could not go into Sarah. So he had to be circumcised. At 99, he goes into Sarah and produces a son named Isaac, which immediately produces Esau and Jacob. So the lineage of Jesus had some darkness all the way through it. I'm trying to show you the grace here. Because all the way through the lineage from Abraham on, the Bible said that Abraham was a prophet and perfect with God. And he staggered not at the promises of God because he was fully persuaded that which God had promised he was able to do. But it looked like me he staggered when he slept with Hagar. But God said he didn't stagger. I don't believe God sees sin the same way you and I do. I don't think God's as quick to point it out because he knew he had a remedy named Jesus. And I believe Jesus done away with a sin of all mankind. Because John said in John 1:29, behold the Lamb of God that's going to take away the sin of the world. I don't think God sees as much sin on earth as you see on earth. I think he sees the goodness of God. And if he ever established the identity of who we are, we'll become exactly who he says we are. Now I'm going to show you some things today, and we've got a lot of scriptures, and I want to show you some things that I believe the Holy Spirit is trying to say to us. So we see here that Judas received the kingship, Joseph received the double portion, and Levi received the high priesthood. So we see that Judah got the kingship. Now where did Jesus come out of? Out of the lineage of who? Now watch this. I want you to see something. Something changed about Abraham's life when he met Melchizedek. Now you know who Melchizedek is. That's the one that came and they had communion with Abraham just when after he had fought a battle and won. Y'all with me? I know I got to give you a lot of information here, but it's fine. We got to get this information so we can go where we need to go. And so what happened? Melchizedek come to Abraham and he paid tithes to him. Remember the story? And then all of a sudden the priest, Melchizedek, blessed Abraham. Now under the old covenant Levitical priesthood, which come out of the tribe of Levi, never blessed folks. They followed an order and a principle, and if they followed the order and the principle, then things worked out. But Melchizedek came along and he blessed Abraham. And because he blessed Abraham, the blessing was on Abraham for the rest of his life. You can see the story. And so here's Abraham. He gets blessed and he goes on about his business, and God's about to bless him, and the favor of God follows him all of his life. And then what happens? We see the lineage of what's about to happen here. So if we read the Old Covenant, I hear people say, well, this is the worst time it's ever been. No, it's always been bad. Since the fall of Adam in the garden, it's always been bad. Man has always been bad till Jesus came along and became man and delivered man out of badness. So bad has always been bad. Now I want to show you something. Go to Acts chapter 1, verse 19 and 20. Acts chapter 1, verse... And you say, Pastor, what does this have to do with anything? I'm going to show you. And it became known to all those dwelling in Jerusalem, so that the field that is called in their own language, Akel Damah, that is the field of blood. Now you know what happened there, right? Judas Sold himself out. Right? Let's go on. Let's read verse 20. For it is written in the book of Psalms, let his dwelling place be desolate, and let no one live in it, and let another take his office. What's happening here? We know that Judas sold himself out, killed himself. They took the money that Judas had gotten paid to sell Jesus out, the 30 pieces of silver, which what you paid for a female slave. He was buying you back, man. They were buying you back and you just didn't know it. But they sold him out for 30 pieces of silver. He sold Jesus out. And then Judas took the silver back and threw it on the porch. You know the story. And they took it and went and bought him a burying place, which was a field of blood here that it talks about. And it's going to be a desolate place. And that's where you put all the dead folks. Right? All the sacrifices, all the burnt offerings. Everybody that was given as a sacrifice was placed in this field of blood. And they said that he hung himself, and all of a sudden the rope broke. You know the story. And he fell into the gully. And the Bible said his insides gushed out. And now we've taken that and threw Judas in hell. And said Judas went to hell. But that's not true. Because the last thing that Judas did was ate the bread and took communion. And all of a sudden what was on the inside of him was gushed out on the bones of everybody that had died before. And Judas was delivering people through Judas. And Judas didn't know he was being delivered. That's grace. And God's grace is bigger than what the church has preached because we haven't understood what was happening here. The Bible said he was going to lose his office. But you got to understand something. The 12 tribes of Israel that was born through Jacob, we had 12 disciples. All of a sudden, when Judas sold out, he was no longer a disciple. He had to be replaced. If you notice something, the 12th disciple had to be fulfilled and put back in office before the Spirit of God fell in Acts chapter 2. The Spirit of God is not going to fall in the church till we get some order and some divine government in there. What are you talking about? I'm talking about when we understand grace, this office is going to be a desolate place. This place is going to be a desolate place. But then it's going to come alive when Jesus shows up and reveals everybody. He was telling them in the last days, this is what's going to happen, guys. You're going to lose the birthright, but there's one going to come that's going to restore the birthright back to you. And his name is Jesus. He loves you, man. He loves you. I want you to go to Matthew chapter 14, verse 24 and 25. I want to show you something very powerful. This is very powerful. I never seen this. I've had this scripture even before I was struggling with this scripture before I even had my incident back in May. But this scripture has not left my mind in the last 10 months because this is where we're going. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Verse 25. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them walking on the sea. Now I want to stop right there because I want to elaborate. They've just left Jesus on the shore. He's told them he's going to meet them on the other side. You read the beginning of the text. And all of a sudden, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. And we've knocked these guys, these disciples, and said, well, why didn't they know that was Jesus? Well, I think they did know it was Jesus. But I think that sometimes we ask the wrong questions. And God doesn't have any choice but to answer the questions that we ask. Now watch this. Just a few hours earlier, he was on the shore with them. He hadn't changed clothes. He hadn't took a shower. He hadn't shaved his beard off. He still looked the same. But they knew the devil and his demons come out about 3 or 4 in the morning. And so they knew the spirits that were operating in the world. They didn't know whether that was a ghost. Because if you read the rest of the story, the fourth watch is after 3 o'clock in the morning. Y'all good? Because the Jewish calendar don't start till 6 o'clock at night. So 6 to 9 is the first watch. And from 9 to 12 is the second watch. And from 12 to 3 is the third watch. And from 3 to 6 is the fourth watch. He was walking on the water at 3 o'clock in the morning now. He wasn't in the sack sleeping. He was walking on the water. So I figure they probably couldn't see him real good from a distance walking on the water, even though he was the light of the world. 26. And when the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were troubled, saying, it's a ghost. And they cried out for fear. 27. And immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid. Now look this up in the Greek. It is I is the actual Greek word I am. It's the I am. The I am stepped out here walking away. Now Peter and those disciples knew him as a healer. They had seen him multiply and bless food and increase food. But they'd never seen anybody walk on water before. So Peter said, Lord, if that's you, watch 28. And Peter asked and said, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. Now watch this. command me to come to you on the water. Think about the question he asked him. Jesus can't deny himself. He didn't have any choice but say, come. If he'd have said, no, you can't come, then that would have meant he won't who he was, and Jesus can't deny himself. So Peter asked the wrong question. Sometimes when you pray, you ask the wrong question. If that's you, Lord, bid me to come. If that's you, Lord, tell me, let me know. And he said, come. Now, the actual Greek word for this word come, I looked it up in the Latin and the Arabic, and I looked it up in several different texts. Even in the Hebrew text, it means the one coming, as he gets closer to you, he's going to become just like what he's looking at. And Peter answered, verse 28, and Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water. In other words, if it is you, I'm not real sure, but if it's you, let me come to you, because the closer I get to you, I'm going to become like you. Now there's some key words here. Let me come to you on the water. Now you know you can't walk on no water. But when I looked up the word come, we know we can walk on a word. But he said the word come in the actual Greek and the Latin is it's a word that's broken down. It's really not a good English word that we've used. But it's a word that means the closer I get to him, the more I'm going to look like him. Now watch this. Verse 29. And he said, come. And when Peter had come down out of the boat. Now wait a minute. He had come down out of the boat. So he had to jump off the side, evidently. Now this won't no yacht. This was kind of like a little Big John boat probably. So he jumps down on it, and why didn't his feet go down in the water? Come, and when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. So he's walking on the water for a little streak there. And the more he looks at him, the more he becomes like him. Now it don't say if he took 4 steps, 26 steps, or 38 steps. But I ain't never took one. So I'm not going to knock Peter if he only took 3. Look at verse 30. And when he saw the wind was boisterous, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. 31. And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand, caught him, and said, O ye of little faith, why did you doubt? So he stretched out his hand and he caught him. Now, how many of you ever tried to walk on water and catch somebody that's going under the water? I want you to understand. Listen to me now. You have a picture. You ever been trying to get somebody out of water and they're struggling to swim and they're fighting you and hurting you and almost kind of drown you? Here's a man going under the water, and I guarantee you he won't just say, please get me, Jesus. I bet he was just flapping and doing all he could do, trying to tread that water. But Jesus reached down, standing on the water, and picked him up. And as he touched him, he became like him. Let me tell you, if you'll turn your eyes toward Jesus in the middle of your storms, there'll be a great calm that'll come over you. If you don't focus on what's going wrong with you and focus on what's right about you, you'll see a great calm come over you. And the winds that you think are terrible will only be at a distance because they won't be around you anymore. Now watch this. I want you to see this. Your head is your servant and not your master. So the Greek word for come means looking at Jesus, you become just like what you're looking at. Looking at Jesus, he became supernatural. So he was looking at the wind now, and the test is over now. Now I want you to go back, and I want to pick back up because I want you to see something here that's absolutely remarkable when we can understand Joseph, and we can understand Jacob, and we can understand why they did what they did. Now you got to understand, at this point in time, Peter did not have the Spirit of God living on the inside of him, and he still walked on water. I tell you, the water's dying to be walked on. It's just trying to find somebody that'll walk on it. Because we have had a capacity to allow fear and doubt and unbelief to create in our minds to where we no longer keep our eyes on Him. We focus on all the things that surround us. I'm telling you what, you listen to the radio and CNN for about 3 hours and see what you're thinking. I'm not trying to be negative, but just see what you're thinking. See how your mindset completely goes back to what's going on in the world, and all of a sudden you fall into a trap of missing what... Let me tell you something. When you focus on Jesus, you can't focus on those things. and fear will grip you, and doubt will grip you, and all these things will start to try to come to get you. Why? Because you're not keeping your eyes on Jesus. Turn to somebody and say, keep your eyes on Jesus. Now, I want to show you something here. Let's go back to Genesis chapter 49, verse 22. And I'm going to show you some powerful revelation here in regards to keeping our eyes on Jesus. Joseph is a fruitful vine, and a fruitful vine near a spring whose branches climb over a wall. And I thought, Lord, that is amazing. And I began to put some parallel together here. Do you know what he's saying? You know what he's prophetically saying here? Spring, look at this. Spring in the actual Hebrew is well. He's prophesying here in Genesis 22, and Jesus is fulfilling this prophecy about Joseph. What does Joseph mean in actual Hebrew? Yahweh. What was he prophesying? Look at this, man. This is absolutely wonderful. When I saw this, I just wanted to shout. Go with me to John chapter 4. I never saw this before. This is great revelation, man. John chapter 4. He left Judah and departed again to Galilee. And he needed to go through Samaria. Now, you know, Jews didn't talk to Samaritans. And he came to the city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now, how many of you know that this is where he was buried? Let's go to verse 6. And Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well. It was about 12 o'clock in the afternoon, the 6th hour, which is 12 o'clock. They start 12 o'clock. 9th hour is 3 o'clock. That's when Jesus was on the cross. How many of you know the 6th hour is when darkness covered the earth, and for 6 through 9 it was dark upon the very time he was sitting at the well. See, there's always great things about numbers. So we see him, he's sitting by the well. Now watch this. Y'all good? Now let's go to 7 and 8. And a woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, give me a drink. Now he was not supposed to be talking to a Samaritan. She went there at lunchtime because all the women went early in the morning and she didn't want to be around no women. She was looking at a 7th husband. Really? That's what's going on. Look at verse 8. For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy some food. Now watch this. I want you to see something. So the branch ran over the wall to the woman that was a Gentile. She came to get water at 12 because she knew women would be there. We see a Jew talking to a Gentile. What happened? Joseph, which is symbolic of Yahweh, was going to go across the wall and break the barriers and start talking to the Samaritans that he wasn't supposed to talk to. Where did he do it? At the well where who was buried? Joseph. So what drew him to the well? The bones of Joseph that he was going to be a representative of in the new covenant. Are y'all here? Y'all don't seem as excited as I do. Because I'm telling you, here's exactly what happened. The branches went across the wall and went across the barriers and started talking to the Samaritans that he wasn't even supposed to speak to. He went out of his way to go through Samaria to talk to a Samaritan. Why? Because he wanted to break the barriers. Go to Ephesians. For he himself is our peace, who has made both one and has broken down the middle wall of separation. What was Jesus doing? He was prophesying and fulfilling Genesis 49 and 22 when he said the branch is going to run across the wall. What was the wall that was separating them? The Samaritans couldn't talk to the Jews. In other words, Jesus said, I'm tearing that thing down because I'm the peacemaker. I'm going to bring peace into both situations, and I'm going to bring an absolute serenity because I'm bringing grace back on the earth. He was fulfilling Genesis 49 and 22. What's happening here, guys? Look what's happening. Now, let's go on. I want to go on. Let's go to John chapter 4, verse 9. Watch this. This is great. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, how is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? She knew he wasn't supposed to be talking to her. For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans, but Jesus does. The church don't want much dealing with sinners, but Jesus does. Grace is a big thing. We need some graceful folks. Well, Pastor, they ought to know better. They've been saved a long time. They've been saved. That's it. They don't have any revelation. Verse 10. Jesus answered and said to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink. In other words, if you knew who I was, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. If you knew who I was, you'd ask me for some water and I'd give it to you. She wasn't supposed to give him no water, and he wasn't supposed to be talking to her. But he was fulfilling a prophecy in Genesis 49:22. That he's going to climb across the walls at a spring or at a well. That was the first time it's happened, man. Look at verse 11. And the woman said to him, Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? You ain't got nothing to get no water with. He said, honey, I have water you know not of. Look, he didn't say that. I made that up. Look at verse 12. It sounded good, though. So are you saying that you're greater than our father Jacob? Now here's a woman calling Jacob her daddy. That's why he said it in Genesis 49. He said, now listen to Jacob, listen to Israel, your father. They knew him as Jacob, but he wanted his sons to know him as the gift that was given to him by Jesus, because when he said Israel, he always thought of Jesus, and when he was signifying Jesus when he talked about himself being Israel. Because he remembered wrestling with Jesus and getting blessed. Are y'all good? So you're greater than our father Jacob who gave us the well? You're greater than the one that dug the well? Now, the translation of the text doesn't say that he actually dug the well. So we don't know whether he dug it or he already took possession of it after it was already dug. It doesn't say in the text. And Josephus, I went back and studied that. He didn't say he dug the well either. So I'm not saying that Jacob dug the well, but I'm just saying the well was Jacob's well. And that's where Joseph was buried. As well as his sons and his livestock. Verse 13. Jesus answered and said to her, whoever drinks of the water, you'll thirst again. If you drink of this water, you're going to thirst again. But if you'll notice something, let's go back to verse 12. Are you greater than our father Jacob who gave us the well, and you drink from it himself, as well as his sons, and his livestock is drunk here? In other words, what she was saying is all 12 tribes is drunk out of this well and all of his livestock. But if you'll notice something, he didn't say you're living in adultery in verse 12. She calls Jacob her father, and she was a Gentile. He was saying to the woman, you do not have to drink to give me, but if you knew who I was, you would ask me for a drink and I'd give it to you. God does not demand anything from us. He supplies everything for us. That's why he said that, guys. He said if you knew who I was, you'd be asking me for something. I think that's a good parallel that some of you need to be asking him for something instead of sitting around all the time. Listen, Jesus come to serve, not to be served. You're not a servant of God. You're a son of God. Now, that's not an offense to women. God doesn't see gender.
Thank you so much for joining us today at Power in the Word. All of us here at Harvest Fellowship Church want you to know that God is not mad with you, but he loves you so very much, and he has a plan for your life. Please feel free to contact us here at Harvest Fellowship Church at our website, harvestfellowshipchurch.net. So until next week, please remember there's power in the Word.